should the Trinity belief or acknowledgement of the Trinity be a requirement for church membership? One thing I'll say is it really, like, it depends, because when you think about church membership, people view church membership differently. Some people look at church membership and they're like, what they mean by church membership is entering to the body of Christ. That's one thing, right? Which is in another way asking, is the Trinity a salvific issue, right? Do you need to accept the Trinity to be saved? And I kind of answered that question earlier. The way most people view church membership is, can you come to my local church? Can you be a part of my local body? Already answered if we're speaking about the formal way. And secondly, this is the way I think most people kind of view this question as well. So it depends, but it depends how aligned you want your congregation to be. I don't see any problem if a local church, if their hierarchy, right, if their church leadership structure says in their bylaws or doctrines of faith, etc., you have to believe and accept the doctrine of the Trinity in order to be part of the church membership. That makes sense. It's just like when we think about an employment, right? You go to an employer, right, and you are signing a contract which says, I agree, right? Most people just focus on the money, right? This is how much I'm getting paid. But they're going to give you a code of conduct. You have to behave in a certain way. You have to speak in a certain way. You may have to dress in a certain way. You may have to look a certain way, etc. These are all of the things you sign up to as you take on employment in a specific place of work. And one thing you have to realize is, which is significant, and I think relevant to what we're talking about now, is the higher up, the more significant up you go, typically the more stringent, the more strict some of those limitations can be. So how much higher up for the Church of God? I like sports, right? And it's funny because I'll give you a sports analogy to kind of prove the point I'm talking about. One of the sports I like a lot is the NBA, right? And in recent weeks, there was a player who was going online on the internet, right, and showcasing a firearm, it would seem, right? And in certain work environments, the employer may not even know that an employee, someone who works for that company, that establishment, is even doing those things publicly. Why? Because they don't make it their business to know. They may not be as sophisticated or even care to know. You know what? You do whatever you want to do, but when you come to work, you're on your best behavior, etc. But the MBA is a different sort of establishment. That's what I was talking about. The higher up you go, the more stringent things typically are. And the MBA have rules in place, and they'll say things like, you know what? You can't have a firearm in MBA-owned facilities. Why is that? Because they don't want anyone to bring those sorts of weapons into those environments. This goes back, even funny enough, to a previous NBA case where someone, actually a player, actually brought a gun. Multiple players actually brought guns into the locker room, right? And that caused a big drama. Those players were suspended for like the whole season, etc. So they will set stuff up in place in order for things like that not to happen. Now they will have things in their bylaws like, if you bring our company, our establishment into disrepute, if you make us look bad, in simple terms, we may be able to fine you, we may be able to terminate your contract if this is a repeat offense, or an offense significant enough for you not to work again, right? So that player I was talking about recently, he showed a firearm, it would seem, one time. And then a couple of weeks later, after being suspended and etc., and saying, you know, I'm sorry, he did it again, right? So the first punishment was a couple of games suspension and a couple of games pay suspension. This time, it's most likely going to be even more severe. And at some point, imagine if this continues to persist. They could turn around and say, look, you know what? You are bringing so much negative stigma, so much negative press to our business. You're actually losing us money now, because you're now making it seem like the NBA is just full of violent players. And that's not the image that they ultimately want. So because of that, they're going to say, bye, we're done with you, right? If you want to be a gangster, if that's what you're up to, like, bye, etc. So I'm just giving you that example of something which came to mind, which I think is relevant to what we're talking about here, right? If you want to set your church up in a specific way and you're like, look, you know what? On our church membership form or in our church membership intake interview, however you're going to do this, we're going to ask you, do you believe in this doctrine? And again, I want to highlight this again, right? This doesn't have to just be about Trinity questions in regards to church membership. You could ask questions on, and I would expect questions on multiple different things. And if it wasn't as clear from like an intake church membership, when you're fellowshipping amongst these individuals, things are going to come up, right? Right? Things will come up at different times when you're fellowshipping and questions come up, or you start speaking about current events, right? If something blows up in the online space, right, then it's likely all of the individuals in the body in different places who hear about it are going to start speaking about it. Oh, did you hear about this? Or what do you think about the Trinity? Is it salvific or is it not? What do you think about believing in Jesus? Is it by faith or is it by works? Like, these are questions which will come out. What do you believe about the end times? Do you believe in the pre-trib? Do you believe in the post-trib? Do you believe in the mid-trib? Like, all of these questions will eventually come up one way or another. That's why sometimes it's very wise to just have them on the outset. And you say, look, you know what? These are the fundamentals. And bear in mind, right, I didn't say this already, but I'll say this now, right? When we think about the body of Christ, right? Look, we have different denominations, right? We've got Lutherans, we've got Methodists, we've got Evangelicals, we've got Pentecostals, we've got Baptists, we've got all of these different groups. And they're secondary, third, fourth tier issues which don't matter in the bigger scheme of things. Me and my wife were speaking about like a third, fourth tier doctrine. And I was just like, you know what, like this really ain't even that significant. Like it's not a big deal, even though so many people in the body of Christ make it a big deal. And the reason I'm bringing up the denominations is because we may have different agreements, and non-denominational as well, obviously. We may have different disagreements about certain things, but there's certain things which all denominations, right, especially the mainstream denominations, should have in common. And those are the things which you should see across the board in different church membership settings. That's why you can look across different statements of faith, across different ministries, different websites, etc. And you should see similar stuff.